All right, here we are again. Been a little while since I did any kind of content on this channel, and I decided I wanted to do a live stream, so here we are. Not sure how many viewers I have right now. I'm gonna wait a few minutes here. Also, if anybody is in there, can you tell me like what the audio sounds like, if it sounds good or bad? That would be helpful. I did try to test it before I jumped in here, but yeah, you know how these things go. So it looks like we have 3 concurrent viewers, which is kind of cool. Yeah. All right. So Kurt Van Eaton. If by the way, if I butcher the hell out of your name, sorry about that. So he says it sounds good, which is great. All right. So let's get started here. I'm gonna kind of go through some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at today. So basically, I wanted to build a vanilla chat app with Dart. So no Flutter, no libraries, nothing like that. And my main reason for wanting to do this is because I want to explore the null safety features that have been added into the language. And obviously, if you have a chat app, you've got a lot of I/O happening. So you've got a lot of web sockets and, you know, HTTP requests and stuff like that. And there's a lot of uncertainty there. So you've got pieces that are coming in from outside your system, and you need to make sure that they're not null. And yeah, obviously that's a big test of like whether or not we can deal with that kind of thing. So I figured this would be a great app example that we could use for testing out some of these features. Now, I also have a tutorial on this stuff actually all ready to go. I haven't posted it yet because I want to make sure that I have a consistent feed of content when I decide to start posting videos again. But yeah, so if you don't understand any of the null safety stuff that we come up against today, just ask some questions and I'll try my best to answer them. And yeah, other than that, let's have fun. Oh yeah, one more thing. So I went ahead, normally I live code everything, but I wanted to make sure that this is not going to go way too long. So I coded the HTML that we're going to use. I got the CDN links we're going to use. We're going to use Font Awesome and Bluma for CSS. And then I've also got the CORS headers so that we can have a Dart server and also use our web server and not have any issues. I'll show you what these views look like when we actually get to them. But first, what we're going to do is build the aforementioned server. So here I actually have a simple web template here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a bin folder here, and I'm going to create a server.dart file. And basically, what we want this server to do is we want this server to take the user's username and then pass it to the client. So it's going to take the username from a sign-in page and then pass it to the client, and then also upgrade the user's request into a web socket. So that's mainly what it's for. But for now, let's we're just going to write a simple server just to get it started. We're going to need Dart.io and Dart converts, and then we'll have our main function here. So we'll specify the port here. I'm going to just have it 9090. Remember, the Dart dev server, I believe, runs on 8080, so we need to have a different port than that. Then we'll have the server itself. So this needs to be async. Server itself is http server.bind internet address loopback v4 and our port. So this will bind it to localhost 9090. And then we'll have a little print statement. Just say server listening on port. And then we'll put in our port here. and then we'll have a await for loop, so we can iterate through the HTTP server requests that we're getting. So HTTP request in server, like that. And we'll have two cases here, but before we have our cases, we need to put in our course header. So every request will have a response, and that response needs to implement the course headers. Otherwise, we'll run up against some issues. So request.response.headers.add, and then let me grab my core strings. So I want to add this one. And let me just copy this. I don't know why I'm using the keyboard like that. And I'll grab this one too. There we go. So that'll put the course headers on, and then we'll have a switch statement here. And we're going to switch on request.uri.path. So this will be the actual path of the URL. We'll have a case for sign in. For now, we'll just break on that. And we'll have a case for the WebSocket, which will just be WS. Excuse me. And then we'll break on that as well. And we also have our default case, just to filter out everything else. Okay. So this should be sufficient for now. We'll come and flesh this out as we add more to our actual front end. Okie dokie. So let's see. What do we want to do next? All right. So let's go to the front end and start kind of inspecting the pieces that we're building here. So let me show you guys these HTML pieces, so that you can see kind of what these are going to look like. They're pretty rudimentary, but they get the job done. All right, so let's see. Let me grab one of these. I'm going to grab the chat room. So this is what the chat room is going to look like. I'll just put it in the index here in between this div. And then I'm going to open this inside of Mozilla so that you guys can see it. Let's see, let me make sure you guys can actually see this. There we go. So that, now of course it's missing the Bluma CSS. Let me put that in real quick. And the font awesome stuff so that you can actually see what it looks like. Let me reload it. There we go. All right, so the box here at the top is also going to be wider. It's going to require a little bit of CSS, which I can actually make real quick. So I'll show you guys this after I switch back from the browser. So this is more what it's going to look like. So just chat room, then we'll have a box, and then we'll have another input field so that the user can type in their messages. Then the other view, the sign-in form, is going to be even simpler. So let's just replace this real quick. It's just going to look like this. So just chat app, Dart chat app, and then a little skateboard, and then an input box to put in the username, and then join chat button. So it's pretty basic, nothing too complicated. All right, and let's remove this HTML here. Oops. Didn't mean to remove the CDNs. We'll remove this HTML here. In fact, we'll remove everything from the body for now. And so here, I put in the CDNs here, these two links. One of them is Cloud Awesome, one of them is Cloud Awesome, one of them is Bluma. And then in styles.css, I put in the background color, and then for the chat room text box, we've increased the height to 600 pixels and then given it some scroll on the y-axis so that it can move up and down. Nothing too complicated. All right. So the first thing we want to do in this client-side application is kind of create a router. And so what we'll do here is we'll create a router.dart file. And basically, because we want this to be kind of like a single page app in the sense that it can move between these two views without actually having to load anything, we'll create this like router path. And actually, before we even do that, let's create a folder called views, and we'll create a view.dart abstract class. So the idea here is that we'll generalize the view into a class, and then we can use it in our router. So class view, abstract class view rather. We're going to need, let's see, Dart HTML in here. So we'll have a onEnter function, and this will take in a document fragment. So that's like the fragment of HTML that we want to use. Then we'll have a onExit function. And notice I'm putting bodies here. I'm going to be calling other functions in these bodies. That way we don't have to repeat our code multiple times. And then we'll have a prepare content function. Then we'll have a render function. And render is also going to need to take in the document fragment. And this should be contents, not content. All right, and then we'll have two more functions. These will be generic, so add event listeners, and then remove event listeners. All right, so on enter, we'll call prepare content, and it will call the render function with the contents in it. And this should be render, not render. Then on exit, we'll call remove event listeners. Prepare content, we'll call add event listeners. And then render here, we'll have some actual logic. We'll just use a query selector to grab a element with ID app, which we'll put into our HTML. And here we're going to actually use a null safe cascade operator. So inner HTML equals, let's set it equal to nothing, and then we'll append our contents to it. So the contents are those little view fragments that I was using before. And those will be in each of our different views. So we'll have a view for the sign-in form and a view for the chat box. So I've generalized all of this so that we don't have to rewrite it. We can just call super.render, for instance, if we want to call render, or we don't even have to override it, for instance, because this should be complete for most of what we want it to do in our app. Okay. So now we can go back to the router and start writing this thing. So basically, first of all, we want to import the view type. And then what we'll do is we'll create a type def for view instance function, which will have a view return type. And it'll be a function that takes in a map. And the map is basically just, I don't know what, there we go. I spelled function wrong. The map is basically just some JSON data. In most cases, it'll be like the username data, but it could also be other data. So then the router itself needs to have a constructor. We'll have a field called routes, which will be a list. And let's create that field. So this will be a list of map of string dynamic. actually not string dynamic, string view instance function. So each of our routes will have one of these functions attached to it. Let's see, why is this arrowing on me? Let's see. See. Isn't a field in closing class? Yeah, yes, it is. Alright, well, I'll figure this out. Remove this real quick. Still causing some kind of this is annoying. It looks like the formatter is trying to format, but it's screwing up. So let's see. I'm gonna go in and see if I can kill it automatically and then restart it. All right, so reload. There we go. I'll put our logic back in here. So this time I'll start with the routes. Final list map string view instance function. So routes, and then we'll have the router constructor again, where we just are using the initializer list to initialize the routes into an empty list. Okay, so there we go. That actually worked. Now we need a register function so that we can register the route. So it'll be string path, and then the view instance function. And basically it'll just be routes.add. Then we put in the map here with the path and the function, like that. Then we'll have a function here called go to view, which will take in the string path, and then a map params. So if we want to add params to the view, for instance the username, we have this optional parameter here. Now notice I put a question mark after it. That means it's nullable. So we can put null in there, and so we need to deal with that inside of the function here. So we'll say function equals routes dot first where the route contains key at the path. All right, so we try to find the specific route that contains that key. We'll have a little or else here, where it's just an empty function that returns map. And then once we do that, we can then put the path in. We can call it like a normal map, because this will bring us back a map. Then we can get the path, which will just be the view instance function, which will give us back the function. And then when we call the function, we'd normally just say function params, and that would work. But obviously this is not going to work because the function here could be null. As you see, like the actual type analyzer gave us a question mark. So we need to deal with that. And we can deal with that by using a bang. So we're just saying, okay, I know this is never going to be a null value, so I'm going to use the bang to make sure to convert it from a nullable value to a non-nullable value. And then for params here, the issue is because of our function definition up here, taking in a non-nullable map and the map that we're passing in here being nullable, we need to deal with that. So we can use our little double question mark operator and then insert an empty map in that case. So if params comes back as null, we just pass in an empty map, and yeah. All right, so the other thing we're going to do here is create a global router, and this will help us later on. So We just put the router class down here and instantiate it. That way we can use it anywhere in our app. Or, yeah, in our client side of our app. And it looks like we have a few more people in here. Hey guys, how you doing? All right, so we got the router and then the generalized view. Let's go ahead and create the sign-in view. So I'll just call this sign-in.dart. And I'm going to make this pretty general for now, and then we'll expand upon it later. So in here, we're going to need Dart HTML. Also need our view.dart, and we'll need the router. All right. Normally I wouldn't do these local paths like I'm doing, but it's fine in this case, I think. Anyway, so I'm going to call this sign in view extends view like that, and then we can use our VS Code to add the missing overrides, which is mainly just the add event listener, remove event listener, though we are going to override some of the other functions. And then what we'll do is we'll add our different fields that we're going to need. So we need our document fragment contents. This will be final. And then we'll have a div element, which we'll call the chat box. Or let's just call it the sign in box. The paragraph element, and it needs to be capital, which will be our validation box. Input element, which will be our name field, and then a button element, which will be a submit button, and our HTTP request, which will be our response. All right, so all of these are going to give us errors because they're obviously not initialized, and that means that they can potentially be null. And let's fix that real quick. So what we'll do is create a constructor here. So sign in view, not sing in view, sign in view. So sign in view is going to take nothing. We'll have the contents initialized here with the document fragment object. Then we'll call on enter with the contents. And what we can do with the rest of these to deal with the nullability or the potential null values is we can use a keyword called late. So this allows us to initialize these later in our class. So they don't need to be initialized once we start the class. Put late in front of everything like that. Then I can initialize them in different instances and stuff like that. All right. So let's override on exit. This needs to be void. So on exit, if we recall, it just calls the remove event listeners, which is great, but that's not all the functionality that we wanted to do. We wanted to also use our router dot go to view for the chat room. We'll put our params in here. And the username will be our response text. Let me make sure I spelled that right. There it is. All right, it's because it's nullable. We'll deal with that in a second. We also want to call super on exit like that. Let's see. All right. So what's the issue? Argument type set string can't be assigned to parameter map dynamic question mark. Okay. Make sure. So yeah. All right. That should be all right. Why does it think this is a set? Oh, right, because I have a comma. That's why. There we go. That was dumb of me. All right, so now let's override the prepare content function. And in here, what we'll do is we'll get our contents in our HTML, and we'll set it equal to our view. So the HTML that I've already written here for this particular page, which is this bit here, this sign-in bit. And I can actually show you what some of these values map to. All right, so right here, our div element, the sign-in box is this here, the chat sign-in. Then the paragraph element, the validation box here, is, I believe, let's see if I can find it. It's, where is it? Let's say help. Yeah, right here, this P class. Then we've got the input, which is right here. This will be the name field. And then the submit button is just a button right down here, join chat button, which we need to bind. So in this prepare content function, let's set all these up. So we'll start with our sign-in box. So we'll set this equal to contents dot query selector, and we'll use that chat sign-in ID to get it. And I believe I used a different, yeah, I used camel case here. Now notice it's throwing an error, but not because it's nullable. I mean, it is also nullable, but also because it needs to be a div element, and using query selector just gives us back an element question mark. What we can do is just cast it as a div element like that. We don't have to put any non-nullable operators. We could put like the bang operator here to convert it from a nullable to a non-nullable. But since we're doing this casting anyway, like it'll automatically handle it for us. Now we have the validation box, which will be the sign in box, query selector, p.help. And again, we need to cast this as a paragraph element. Then we'll have our name field. Again, we'll use our sign in box, query selector. In this case, we're grabbing input, type equals text, like that. And we'll cast this as an input element. Then we got our submit button, which again will be sign in box, query selector, button, as button element like that. Okay, so that sets it all up. Then we want to call super.prepare, which will then call our prepare content, rather, which will then call our add event listeners function, if you guys recall. So here, so we've set all this stuff up, all these different fields, and then add event listeners will add different event listeners to the name and submit button field and stuff like that, so that we can see what the user's doing with those particular elements. And for now, let's actually go and do that. So let's start with the name field. So name field dot add event listener. And for the name field, we want an input type. And I'm going to put in a method here, which we'll call input handler. Let's create that method. And there we go. This will be void. Then we'll do the same with the submit button, though in this case, submit button will be click, and we'll call this click handler. By the way, I'm quickly making these methods by doing control period in VS Code, and that gives me that context menu where I can select what type of menu I want. And then let's just grab these two, and in the remove event listeners, instead of add event listener, we'll just remove these event listeners. And shouldn't be with an S, so like that. That way we actually clean up everything when we leave the screen, or leave the view rather. All right, so then in the input handler, what we want to do is we want to check to see whether or not the box is not empty. So if the name field value, we're going to need a bang there because it's nullable, is not empty, then we'll go name field dot classes, and what I'm doing here is basically just adding some decoration really. So we're changing the different colors and stuff at the name field. So remove where name equals is danger, and then we'll add is success. So if it's not empty and we put in the stuff and all that stuff, then we want it to show success. We'll also get our validation box and we'll clear the text in that. And then else we'll have name field classes, and we're going to remove the is success in this one. This should be, these are like that, and then we're going to add is danger on this side. That way the user gets a warning if they try to input the stuff and do all this stuff without anything in the name field. Alright, so then for the click handler, again we'll have some kind of decoration logic, but then we'll also have the logic to change from the sign-in room to the actual chat room and send the username back to our server. So if our name field dot value trim is empty this time, so if we have no username in the name field, then we want to take our submit button classes, and again we're gonna use remove where. This time we're gonna say if name is success or name equals is danger, and we want to add is warning. So the button will change color, so it'll go from green or red to yellow. Then the name field dot classes, this one will add is danger, and this for all this I'm leveraging Bluma, so all this is built-in keywords for Bluma. It's not CSS that I'm writing on my own. Then we'll have our validation box dot text. We'll set that equal to a please enter your name, like that, and let's make it username because that makes more sense. All right, and then we'll return here. That way, if this happens, this click event handler will not continue. Then we'll have a little else here, and if the thing is not empty, we'll change this back. So let me just actually copy this and make it easier. So we're going to check to see if this is warning or danger. We want to change it to success. And then we'll have another piece at the bottom here where we'll change it to danger if it fails. So what we'll do is we'll say submit button disabled equals true. So we'll disable the button. And then we'll have a try catch block here because we're going to do a HTTP response back to our server. So we'll get our response, set this equal to await, and this needs to be asynchronous, of course. So we're awaiting the HTTP request post form data. So we're going to be posting to http localhost. Remember we made our server 9090, and we're going to go to the branch or the path sign in. Then our data here will be the username. So username, and so this is name field value, and again this is going to be nullable. If it is null, then we'll just put in an empty string. We know it's probably never going to be null in this case, but yeah, if it is null, then we'll just do that. Then what we'll do is call on exit, and by calling on exit, that will then force the page to call the router and move over to the other path, which will be our chat view. Then if we catch this, then we'll just say submit button, let's see, submit button disabled equals false. So we'll let them use the submit button, and then we'll change its text to failed to join. Please try again. Then we can also do the trick with the classes and turn them into danger. So let me just copy this stuff again. So takeaway is success and is warning, and we'll replace it with is danger, like that. And I think that's all we really need for now for this view. Let's set it up so that we can actually see it in our application when we run everything. So what we can do is come in here. We're going to need to import the view. So views, sign in, and we're also going to need to import the router, like that. And now let's set up the router. So router dot register, and actually we'll use cascade register. For the index, we'll just have a function here that uses our sign in view, like that. And then we'll have another one for the chat room. I shouldn't be using null, but that's for now. What I'm going to do is have this also point to the sign in view, like that. And then we'll just call go to view, and we'll have it start at the index. All right. So now what we can do is open our terminal emulator and just type in, let's see, web dev serve refresh auto. Let's see, I have it in here. Yeah, web dev serve auto refresh. I had it backwards. What that will do is it will automatically rebuild our application every time we change it in, or we change the code, and it'll refresh it in the page. So now we can then go to Mozilla. Let me open the browser here. So localhost 8080. And it looks like we're having some issues, so something's going on. Let's see. Oh, right. I know what's going on. I did not add the appropriate HTML back into our HTML form. I had removed everything from the HTML form. We need the app tag so that we can actually insert the view in. Otherwise, it's just going to show nothing like that. So let's do that real quick. So we'll have a section. Let's give it a class of section. And then we'll have a div container app, like that. And in here, in between this div here, is where our views will appear. And in fact, that is indeed what's happening. So if we look at the browser here, we now have our sign-in page. And so if I put in a name here and I click join chat, it'll try to join the chat. Obviously the server's not running and it doesn't have the logic to actually do anything. So it's going to fail, and you can see the button change color and all that. And if I try to like do it without anything in it, you can see the border of this changes color and this button goes to yellow and so on and so forth. So that's what we were doing with the classes and stuff. We were moving them around so that we could have the different things change colors and stuff like that. Alrighty. Let's see, I'm going to read through the chat now for a second, and then we'll keep going. So, Ignited CMS says he thought I was using the Vim plugin. So, the reason I'm not using Vim in VS Code is because the Vim plugin is really damn slow. They don't use like the native libvim library, which unfortunately makes it really, really bad. Normally, when I'm working professionally, I use Emacs with evil mode, so that uses Vim keys. But I've also backed the OmniVim 2 project, which is just Vim with VS Code plugins, which is nice. And it's also built with Reverie UI, so even though it looks like VS Code, it is it's fully native, which is pretty cool. Then we got a bunch of people saying hi, which is great. So Kevin says hi. Then we got Almond saying hi. Nice tutorials. You teach me Golang. Well, that's good, man. Glad you were able to learn. John here is saying you helped me get started with Rust, which is great. And then we've got Andrew. God, I'm going to screw up your name. Sorry. He says hello as well. And thanks, guys. Good to see that there are people interested in these live streams, despite the fact that I've been gone for like 8-9 months, something like that. All right. If you have any more questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat. I'll go check them out later as we continue. And I'll make sure to answer them. All right. So let's see. Let me make sure that we're on the right thing. Okay, so we got the sign-in form. Now let's build the logic for our backend here. And for that, we're going to actually create a shared library. So create a folder here called lib. And we're going to be creating a couple things inside of it. We'll create some utility functions. So let's create a utils.dart file. And in here, we're going to need Dart convert, because mainly these utility functions will deal with JSON serialization and deserialization. We'll have a enum called actions, and these are the different actions that the user can take inside of our app. So we'll have an action where they join chat, an action where they send a chat message, an action where they leave chat, and a default action. The default action is just the action that's happening when they're doing nothing, basically. Then we'll have a serialize message function takes in an action, which we'll call type, string from, and then a string message. And then this will just call JSON encode, and we'll create our JSON map here. So we'll have a key called type, which will have type to string. Then we'll have a key called from, which will have our from, and then the data, which will have the message in it. And so this format, the from will be the username that's sending the message into the chat when it gets broadcast to the other users, and then the actual message itself will be the data here. Now we want to make the reverse here, so deserialize message. So this will return a map string of dynamic. Deserialize message, string message. So this will be the JSON string that we get back. Okay, anyway, so the decode will be JSON decode on that message, and then we'll return our map and have the type. We're going to need to create a function here to convert the action into an action from a string. So get action is what we'll call this. We'll get the type key from this map. Then we'll have the from, so decode from, and then the data, decode data, like that. And then let's create the get action function. So actions, and this takes in a string. And basically we can just use some pretty simple functional programming. So action values, first where, this should be lowercase, where the element equals the type. That's what we're going to return. Let's see, this needs to have parentheses. There we go. So it checks the two strings against one another, and then it will return the appropriate type. So these will all be in string format. It'll be like join chat, chat message, so on and so forth, and then we just convert them back. All right, that's all we need for the utilities. Let's now create our session. Actually, before we create the session, we'll create the subject. So the subject, subject here will be essentially a representation of the user, and then it'll have all of the listeners that we're going to need on the WebSocket for the user. Well, it's not a representation of the user, but it's basically the WebSocket itself. So Dart HTML. We'll also need our utils, and we can use the package format for this. So this app is called chat app utils.dart. So class subject, and we'll have a web socket. Call this socket, and then we'll have our subject constructor, which takes in the string for the username, and then it takes the socket, sets it equal to a web socket, where it's going to come from our server, so localhost 9090 ws, and then we'll have the params in here, so username equals username, like that. And then we want this constructor to also call to a function that will call Init Listeners. And Init Listeners will set up all the listeners that we want on this web socket. Let's create that real quick. So what we'll do here is we'll just have some print listeners and stuff like that so that we can actually see what's happening with the socket. So socket on open, listen. So when we open the socket, we want to print the socket is open. And then we'll send, and send is a function that we'll create here. It's basically just a alias for socket.send. So we'll send the encoded or the serialized message. Actions dot default action and actually this should be the what do we call it, join chat action. But the other values here are going to be empty because we're not going to send any kind of message across. This is just for like getting into the chat. Then we have and actually while I'm doing this is annoying, so let's create the send function here. So void send is just going to be string data, and we'll pipe that string data into socket.send like this. So it's just an alias for socket.send. Then we'll have another one for close so that we can close the WebSocket, and this will just be socket.close like that. Alright, so now on error, so we can see all the errors if there are any in the WebSocket. And for this, we'll just print out the error. And this will actually end up in the terminal that we're running the server in. So socket errored out. And then we'll put the event in here. Like that. And then socket on close. Listen. Events, and again, we'll just print it out that the socket closed. So I'll just grab this. Socket has closed like that. And actually, I do want to check the event type here. Make sure that I'm getting the right thing. So let's see. Is there an error here? No. Yeah, there is. There's an error here. Okay, so let's just say event.error. No, it's not. Event.data maybe? No. Let's just put the event for now. It should be alright. And later we can specify the error. Alright. Now from here, we need to build the session. Oh, and by the way, the subject needs to be in lib, not in bin. So it's a part of the shared libraries. Session.dart. So the session is going to have two things in it. It's going to have a representation of the user, which will be the username of the user, the WebSocket, and then the HTTP request that we want to upgrade to the WebSocket. And then we'll have the actual session itself. So we're going to need Dart.io, Dart convert, and we'll need our utils. So user is going to have the HTTP session, the WebSocket, and then the username, like that. Then we'll have our constructor here. Now, so I'm going to use named parameters, and obviously these are optional named parameters. So there's a new keyword we can use for the null safety called required. Before, what you'd have to do is bring in like the meta package to do this, and you'd have like @required and all that stuff. So instead, we'll just do it like this. And then for this .name, we're just going to give it a default value. And this way we can avoid the nullable stuff here. So when we call this, because these are optional parameters, they obviously don't have to be called. But if we put required, then that means that they need to be called. So we know for certain when we call a user, we're going to have a session and a socket. And then for the name, if we don't specify the name, then it'll just put an empty string. If we didn't do this though, like if I took this away, you see that the name here will complain about the fact that it can be null, which is an issue. Alright, so now let's make the chat session. So in here, I have a list of users. This is basically how our server is going to handle all the different users that are connecting from the client. So we'll have an add user function here. We'll have the HTTP request. And we'll have a string. And this thing needs to be async. We'll create our WebSocket. So wait WebSocket transformer upgrade. So this will upgrade the HTTP request. And we'll have the user. The session will be our rec.session. The socket will be our WebSocket, and then the name will be our name. Then we can use a stream. So user.socket listen. We can listen on the WebSocket here. And with data, we'll call handle message. This is going to be a method that we'll create here in a moment. So this will take in the user and the data. Then we'll have, let's see, an on-error handler. So for error, we'll print the error. So error on WebSockets. And then on done is the other one that we want. So in this we'll have a function that we'll create called remove user. And this should take in the user so that we can actually remove it. And let's create these methods real quick. All right. And both of these will be void. So let's add that. Okay. So then, after we add the listener to the socket, we'll go ahead and we'll get our users list. So users.add. We want to add the user, obviously, and then we'll print out that we added the user, and we'll get the username for this. So this will all be on the server side where all these prints will happen, stuff like that. All right. So then for handle message, what we're going to do is make sure that we're sending the data back properly, the data that's coming through the chat form. Oops. So it's going to be like, let's see, user.socket add. We'll add a string here. It says user.name said, and then we'll put in the data here. So that'll print out to our console, and then we'll have the JSON decode of the data. Then we'll use our getAction function to get the action type. and the message, which remember we put under data. Let's clean this up a bit. And then we'll have a switch statement on the action. And remember, this could be any of our action types. So we'll add all the missing cases here. Do these real quick. And basically we'll do different things on each action. So when the user joins a chat, we want to basically send back a message that says welcome to the chat. And then we'll broadcast a message that says that the user has joined the chat. So for the user, they're going to see welcome to the chat and followed by their name. And then for everybody else, they're going to see user has joined the chat. So what we'll do is, before we do that, let's create a broadcast message function. So broadcast message is the one that's going to basically broadcast the message to all of the other users' WebSockets. So void broadcast message. This takes in the action, the user, this is the incoming user, and then we've got this parameter which can be empty. And to avoid nullability, we'll set that equal to an empty string. And then we'll have our from be the action. So if the action equals actions.joinChat, then it'll be empty. Otherwise, it'll be incoming.name. Okay. So remember, if we're joining the chat, that means that we basically have the system talking to the user. Otherwise, we want the user to basically see their own name as they're chatting. All right, so chatters, what am I doing? It's users where, say u.name is not equal to incoming.name. So remember, because we want to send this to every other user and not ourselves, we need to filter through that. So we'll have for each, and this should be US for it to make more sense. Socket.add encode. How do we call this? Serialize message, right? Action from and data. There we go. So this will iterate through all the different users that are in the list and then send to their sockets the message that the user has joined or any of the messages that get sent. So like if the user types in a message, then it'll go through, iterate through, find all the other users aside from the user and broadcast to those WebSockets. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so now back up here. When we join the chat, we're going to say users socket add serialize message actions dot join chat. Have an empty string here, and then we'll have welcome to the chat and followed by the user.name. So this is what the user will see when they come in. It'll just say welcome to the chat, and then from the other side, from everybody else, we'll call broadcast message, and then we'll have actions.join chat. We'll put in the user, and then we'll put in the data, which will be user.name. And let's make this to uppercase, so it'll be completely uppercase. Say it's like Tensor, it'll just be Tensor uppercase. Has joined the chat. So the users will see that message and it'll make sense from their side. All right. So in the case where we have a chat message, so if there's just like a normal message coming through, somebody's typed something, then on our side, as the sender of the message, we want to see that the chat message is from us. So we want to differentiate it from if it's somebody else's message. So we'll use user socket add Deserialize Message actions dot chat message, and we'll use from, or actually we'll use you, not from. So when we send a message, we'll see that I sent, and then it'll show the message. On the other hand, the other users will see the broadcast message, which will have our username on it. So this will have that, and then the message. And this should be actions, not action. All right. Whoops. And then finally, when we leave the chat, we'll just call user.socket.close to clean up the WebSocket. Then finally, we need the remove user function to be filled out so that we can properly clean up everything. So what we'll do is we'll print out that the user left user.name, like that, and then we'll go users, this is underscore users dot remove where, so we'll match it to the name. So we find the user, then we remove it, and then we want to broadcast a message. So that says that the user is left. So actions dot leave chat user, and then user dot name dot to uppercase has left the chat, like that. All right, that should make sense. So now we want to take all this logic that we've just created and add it both to our server and to our chat application. So let's go to the server and let's flesh this out a bit so that we can actually have functionality on our sign-in page and also on our WebSockets. So for the sign-in page, this sign-in case here, get our payload. So we're going to use our UTF-8 decoder, and we want to bind it to the request so that we can decode it. We'll use join so that we can get rid of any white space and stuff. We could print out the payload. I'm not going to do that though. We'll get the username, so URI.split query string. Payload. This will give us our map, and we're looking specifically for a username, like that. And then if the username equal not equal to null, because this is nullable, by the way, and username is not empty, we'll have our else here. So if the username exists, it's not null and it's not empty, then we'll have request response dot, I don't know why it came in so quickly, right? We'll put in the username like that. That way we can send it to the front end. And then otherwise we'll have request response. Let's use cascade. So status code will equal 400. And then we'll write, please provide a username. Like that. All right. And then we'll have an await request response close. There we go. So we can clean it up when we're done. Then for the WebSocket, we're going to need to use our session. So up here, let's instantiate the session. We need to import it, by the way. So package chat app session, like that. And then we'll create the session after the server. So our session equals session, or what do we call it? Call it chat session, right? Like that. Okay. So now for the WebSocket, we come down here to the case for the WS, and we'll say var username equals request.uri.query parameters. Remember, we're sending in query parameters with this from the front end. So the front end string, let's see if I can find it to show you guys what I'm talking about. Well, there's here, but where is it? Is it in the router? No, it's not in the router. Where did I put it? I think it's in one of these, actually. Yeah, here. So WS localhost 9090, and then we have the question mark here. These are the parameters. So we're grabbing those with this here, query parameters like that. And then we can just add the user. So request. This will upgrade the request to the WebSocket, and then it'll also add the username to it. And that's actually all we need for the WebSocket itself to work. All right, so now on the view side, what we're going to be doing is adding the actual chat room view. So let's just call this room.dart, and for this, Dart HTML. Whoopsies. Let me close all this saved stuff. We're also going to need our packages. So package. We'll need the subject, and we're also going to need the helper, or the utils rather. We'll need our view type, and we'll need the router. All right, so we'll call this room view. I'll have it extend view. Let's add our overrides, and we're gonna override a few more like we did with the other one. So in the chat room view, we're gonna have a bunch of different fields. We need our subject. We'll have our document fragment, which will be our contents. Then we'll have a map, which will be our params. So the params that come in from calling to this view. This will basically be the JSON. Div elements, which will be a chat box. And this other one will be the chat text. And I'm using the late keyword here because we're going to initialize these late as well. The input element will be the message field, so where the user can type in the message. And then we'll have two buttons. One will be a send button, and then the other one will be a leave button. All right. Let's create our constructor now. This is going to get this params. Then in the, we'll set up the contents, so document fragment. And then we'll also set up this subject. params username, like that. And this should be room view, not view. And then we'll call on enter with the contents in it, like that. Okay. Now let's override on exit so that we get the proper logic. All right. So we'll call super on exit, then which will remove the listeners and stuff, and then we'll have subject.close to close the WebSocket, and then we'll use router go to view, and we'll take this back to the index. Then we need to override the prepare content method. So in this, we're gonna have our inner HTML and the contents. And again, we're going to use the prefabricated HTML that I made before the stream. This should be capital H. So let me grab it. It's right here. This one here. And I'll show you the different parts that are that correspond to these different elements, or these different elements rather. All right, so we got the chat room, which is the div that surrounds everything. That's going to be the chat box here, and then the text. Let's see. Chat room text right here. This div. This will be basically the box where all the messages will scroll through. Then we'll have the message field, which is an input element, which is right here. This is where the user puts in the input for the message. Then we got the send button and the leave button. So let me find those button types. So got a button here. This is the leave button, and then the send button, which is down here. All right. Now we need to set all that up. So chat box equals contents query selector chat dash room. We need to cast this as a div element. Remember, it can be nullable, which is a big thing, but also it comes back as an element from query selector, so we need to change that from an element question mark to a div element. Then we have our chat, what do we call it? Chat text, right? Yeah, chat text. So this will be from the chat box query selector chat room dash text, I believe is what I called it. And this will be as a div element again. Then we have the message field. So that'll be chat box again. Let me just check. And message field, all right, send button, leave button. Okay. So this will be the, it'll be chat message input as input element. Then we've got our send button, chat box query selector, chat send button as button elements, and then we have our leave button. You know, tab 9 does a decent job of guessing my intents here, which is nice. All right, and then we'll have the super prepare content, which calls the add event listeners function and puts all the event listeners on the appropriate fields. Alright, I'm gonna look through chat real quick. See if there's anything, you guys. So Greg Lee asks, what is the color theme that I'm using? It's Space Max Dark. Let's see if I can show it to you. There are actually multiple Space Max themes on VS Code. The one I'm using is this one, Space Max by Comedier. And inside of it, there's Space Max Light and Dark. The dark one is the one I'm using. There's also one that's called Dark Theme. It's not as good. I wouldn't recommend it. And then, of course, I'm using the Fear Code font with the code ligatures. That's why you get the errors and stuff as I'm like building all this stuff. Excuse me. Let's see. We got a couple people saying hello, so think differently says hi. He also deleted a bunch of messages, so interesting. Let's see. We've got Sean. Sorry if I'm screwing up your name, by the way. He says, thanks a ton for the video tutorials. You're awesome. Amazed how much you know. Oh, thank you. It comes with all the experience, I guess. KSMJ says, glad to see you're back live coding Dart. Greetings from Dubai. Oh, that's cool. Got somebody from Dubai. Actually, I've been out to Dubai a few times. Had to work there a couple times. It's a nice place. Let's see. What else we got? I think that's it. I think that's everything. I actually lived in Qatar for a while. In Doha, and I would have to travel to and from Doha to Dubai a lot. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. Anyway, so it was a cool place. A lot of desert. Not really a big fan of the desert though. So Dubai though was completely different experience. All right. Anyway, so let's get back into this. So what we'll do now is we'll start with the add event listeners. So what we want to do is set the send button to disabled. So then we'll add our subject socket on message listen. And we'll call this a subject handler. That'll be a method that we create. Then we'll have our message field. On input is for this one, so we'll call this message field handler. And we'll have the send button. This will be on click, send handler, and then leave button, leave handler. All right. Let's create these methods. And you're right about Vim. I wish I had Vim keys in here, even though they're slow. They're really not worth using in VS Code, in my opinion. But I don't know. I don't use VS Code enough to really warrant installing them or having to deal with that. All right. Then we also want to take, let's see, these three. We'll add them here and we'll have it remove. Remove the event listeners. All right. So let's start with the message field handler. So send button disabled equals message field value, and this is nullable, so we need to have our bang is empty. So this will change whether or not it's disabled based on whether or not there's something in the message field. So if there's something in the message field, then it will not be disabled, and if there's nothing in it, then you can't click the button. That way they can't just send in empty messages and stuff and spam the chat that way. Then for the subject message handler, what we'll do here is we need to decode the message. So decode, so deserialize message, e.data is where we're getting this from, and this can be it can be nullable. Just didn't do that. And this should be event, by the way. Then we'll get our from, so var from code from var msg equals decode data. Remember our format. We need to keep that consistent. So now what we want to do is have an if from equals empty. And what this will do for us is it will allow us to inject custom HTML for each of the messages. So result. This I actually didn't write beforehand, but I can write it real quick here. So for if we have an empty user, we'll have a div like this with a class of tags, which Bulma will use for us, and then we'll have a p with a class of tag. It should be tags is light, is normal. This will have the message inside of it. Then we need to close the p tag, and this should be msg. Like that. And then on the other side, if we have an actual username, then we'll need a little bit more to this HTML. So again, what I can do is just copy this. So we'll have div tags has add-ons. Then instead of a p in here, we'll have some spans. So span class equals tag, and then we'll have another set of classes that change based on some Dart code. So if from equals u, capital U, then we'll have it be is primary. Otherwise we'll have it be is dark. So it'll change the color based on who's sending the message. Then we'll put in from said, and we'll close the span. Then we'll have our other span. So this will be the span for the actual message body. Class equals tag, and then is light, like the p that we have above, p tag rather, and then put in the msg here. And we'll close the span. And let me make sure this is all formatted properly. All right, there we go. And then down here, we can now go and we want the chat text part, and we'll append this HTML to it. This is result, not res. Okay. All right. So now for the leave event handler, this one's easy. We're just going to call on exit. So that will shut down our WebSocket and all that stuff. Let's see, what else do we need? So then send handler. We'll go subject dot send encode. No, this is serialize message. Actions, chat message, params, username, and then which one was this? Message field. Message field value, and this needs to be non-nullable. So we'll put our bang in there. And then we want to clear the message field. So we can use cascade here. So value equals an empty string. Then we'll use cascade again to focus like that. Great. Let's see. So most of this is looking good. Let's now route this up inside of here. So import views room.dart. And what did we call it? The room view, right? So room view, and we'll put in the params like that. And now we should be able to spin up the server and get this to work. Let's see if it is fully done. Something tells me I'm missing something, but we'll see. All right, so I've already got the web dev server rebuilding. Let's jump into another terminal here, and we'll run this server. So now that's listening on port 9090. And while we're at it, let's restart this just in case. Sometimes you need to reboot it if you add a bunch of files like we just did. And then we'll jump over to our browser. So let's put in the name Tensor. Join the chat. So welcome to the chat, Tensor. Let's see if the messaging works. So test. And it says you said test. Okay, so this is working. Let's see what it looks like to have multiple people chatting. So let me set this up real quick. Okay. Painful. There is this one. Okay, that should do it. And then we'll get this one open. So there we go. We got two back to back. So let's put in another name. So tester, something like that. All right, so Tester has joined the chat, which is what we expected. And then if we type in right there. So on Tester's side, it says you said hi there. And then on Tensor's side, it says Tester said. Okay, and of course the colors change like we expect. So everything seems to be working as expected. Something I do want to check is a console. So we are getting some slight errors. Looks like probably from some of the messages that are coming through the WebSocket, which aren't JSON. So it's calling JSON parse on them, and of course it's getting back nullable values. This is not a problem, at least not for something like this. This is something I probably fix later though. But everything should be okay. All right, and let's also check the leave command. So leave Tensor left the chat, and then if we leave here, it brings us back to our main page. So it looks like everything is working as expected. And yeah, so we're actually finished. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send this up to, excuse me, I'm going to send this up to GitHub so you guys can check it out. It's in the description of this video. For now, I'm just going to go through the rest of the chat. If you guys have any questions, get them in there, and I'll get to them. And then, yeah, and then I'll close out the stream. So Greg Lee asks, oh yeah, I already covered that one. So let's see. Helge Sorry again if I butcher your name. Will you cover Flutter web desktop in the future? Yeah, I will. Paul Berger asks, hello, what are the best VS Code plugins to get all the list of properties of any widget? Just use the Flutter plugin. That's the best one. I can show you the extensions I'm using. So, let's see, how do I filter them again? Yeah, here we go. Filter extensions installed. So I've got auto close tag, auto rename, some JavaScript stuff, better comments, better toml, some bracket colorizers. That's what gives me the rainbow brackets and stuff. Spell checker. Then I've got the Dart. This is the official Dart extension. It's really nice. And I have the official Flutter extension as well, which is, again, both of these are really what you need. I also have a Flutter Init L extension, which helps quite a bit. If you're doing any Elixir stuff, I'd recommend Elixir LS. Then I've got a bunch of Git stuff, so Git history, Git project manager, Git lens. I've got my Go stuff, some GraphQL stuff, more Elixir stuff, Hex lens. This allows you to check hex.pm from inside the browser, and then there's also hex.pm intelligent sense. Import costs, this is for JavaScript. Indent rainbow, so this is what gives you the indents that look like that. Indicators, this gives you the indents that look like that, so I get the colors and these little dots. I've got live share, so this allows you to share your screen with anybody. It's just kind of nice, so it creates a little link that you can give to somebody, and then they can come in and use VS Code basically as a collaborative text editor. Then there's the live share audio, which lets you chat through VS Code, and there's more extensions. Gives you like a text chat and some other stuff. Also whiteboard, which is nice. I've got Mermaid JS syntax highlighting, so if I use Mermaid, it'll allow me to see what the actual graphs look like in this preview here. I use this quite a lot for building like flowcharts and stuff. I got some JSON as code. Peacock allows me to slightly change the color. I don't really use it though. Pest file. I guess this is for pest. I don't really use it much. Got PowerShell stuff just in case I want to make some PowerShell scripts. Oops, it also opens up PowerShell. PubSpec assist, this is for Dart and Flutter, so that helps with the PubSpec YAML. I highly recommend it. So as you can see here, you can type in the libraries and it'll automatically grab them for you. Quokka, this is for JavaScript. Again, I don't do much JavaScript, so remote and stuff, this is all for Docker, REST client, Rust analyzer for Rust. I used to use the other one, Racer or RLS. That's antiquated versus the new analyzer here. I recommend if you're doing Rust, you use Rust analyzer. Here's a Spacemax theme that I showed you guys before. I have tab 9, which is where I get my machine learning auto completion. And yeah, a few others. So to do highlighting, this is nice. You can just have like a comment that says to do or fix me, and it'll highlight it for you. Then the VS Code icons, that gives me all of these different icons. So like the Dart files look like Dart files, and HTML looks like HTML, and so on. Protobuf, so protocol buffers, WebAssembly. This is Zig Lang support, which I should disable because I don't use it right now. And then I've got a bunch of stuff disabled here. We've got stuff for C++, stuff for C#, stuff for Clojure, for Scala, Elm, Erlang, Haskell, etc., Idris, and so on. There's quite a lot in here. Every language I use, I have some extension in here. Alright, hopefully that was helpful. I may make a video in the future where I explain some of these extensions a little bit better. Anyway, so what else do we have? JetBrains Mono is also a very nice font. I'm sure it is. There's actually a new Microsoft font that they released with the terminal, which is quite good. It's called like Cascada or something. It's pretty nice. It also has the font ligatures. I do still like Faircode though, because it's just like an old standby. It's completely open source too, which is good. Greg also asked me to show my extensions, which I just did, so hopefully that helps you. Paul, it would be nice to get a list of extensions. Again, other people wanting extensions. Luckily, we went through them. It's okay. Zaxa, I'm sorry if I screwed up your name. There will be a video of this live stream after this live stream ends, so you can watch it as much as you like, even if you missed it. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna call it now. It's been about an hour and 45 minutes, which is, I think, a pretty good time frame. And in it, we built our chat app, and it seems to work as expected. We had some nice little null safety things in here. Thanks, guys, for coming on out. I really enjoyed doing this, and yeah, I'll try to catch you guys later. Hopefully, hopefully in the future, I'll be able to get some of my tutorials up. I've actually got quite a few, and I'm just waiting to post them. I haven't done it yet. So anyway, yeah, I'll see you guys later.